And we are live. I'm broadcasting out of beautiful Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. I'm psychotherapist Travis Hill, and this is Navigate Life Radio, a show where we talk about relationships, mental health issues, work stress, technology's effect on us, and many other topics, including today, where we're going to be talking about narcissists, anger management. We are live weekly on Mondays at 3 p.m. Central here on Facebook Live. Angry narcissists. That's the topic for today. Before we get started, we're going to talk about what narcissism is, just to kind of catch people up for those who don't know. Narcissists are egotistical. I mean, if I'm going to keep it short, that's the answer. And so let me start here. When people think of mental illness, they think of things like depression, anxiety, maybe paranoia, schizophrenia, autism, these types of things. But the reality is that people are actually more affected by people in their lives with personality disorders. And the reason is that people with personality disorders are universally bad at managing their personal and work relationships. So people with personality disorders have a difficult time managing their emotions, and they are really poor at setting and keeping boundaries, and hence they have trouble being able to read other people's behaviors and emotions. So it's not uncommon to see alcoholism, drug use, drug abuse, sexually acting out behavior. But these tend to mask personality disorders that are at the core of the problem. Personality disorders are probably the biggest issue that I have to work on with clients in counseling. Now, we work on behaviors surrounding that, like I mentioned, anxiety, anger, alcohol abuse, these types of things, but at its core, the personality disorder seems to be the thing that is the most disruptive. Everyone knows or is a person with a personality disorder, though you may not know it. And I actually make the argument that personality disorders make up about 20% of the population. It's just an estimate on my part. That's not a stat that I've seen. But 20% seems to be a pretty reasonable number. And when I mean personality disorders, I'm talking about narcissism, borderline personality, antisocial personality, obsessive-compulsive personality. These are disorders of the personality that tend to be extremely disruptive on relationships. And William Glasser, who was a famous psychiatrist, actually, his theory, choice theory and reality therapy that he worked in, actually thought that relationships were the core issue that people brought into any kind of psychotherapy setting. That when we were talking about things like anxiety, anger, depression, relationships seem to be at the core of all that. And if you could resolve people's relationship problems, you could typically resolve their mental and emotional problems as well. I actually think this is what he was referring to when he would talk about relationship problems. I think he was talking about people who were in relationships with those with a personality disorder, or people with a personality disorder trying to manage their relationships. Today, we're going to talk about one type of personality disorder. This is narcissistic personality. It's better known generally as narcissism, and we're going to be talking about the anger that narcissists can display. Now, while most people show some mild narcissism, and in fact, some of it, the egotism that you might see with it is even a little bit healthy, meaning narcissists tend to come across as very confident people. They come across as charming. Those are positive attributes. And people tend to have a little bit of that narcissism in order to be able to kind of function and adapt in their world. The problems come in when people go on the extreme end of that narcissism. They have what's called malignant narcissism, meaning it's a pervasive part of their personality. So sometimes we can all be little egotists, we can all be little narcissists, but this is a person who generally exhibits this behavior or exhibits these types of thoughts and emotions as an entire part of their personality. Narcissists are self-centered. They tend to lack empathy for other people, and they tend to have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. I have found them to actually have low self-esteem deep down, meaning that while on the front, narcissists seem very confident on the cover, deep down, they actually don't think much of themselves at all. Now, this is actually ironic, right? Because they are also genuinely surprised that others don't tend to bow down to their superiority. They're actually genuinely surprised when others don't see the greatness that they see in themselves. This is generally the issue with narcissism, in that you have, on the one hand, someone who tends to have some low self esteem and they don't think much of themselves. And yet, on the flip side, they're surprised when others don't um, fall for their charms or the cover or the mask that they're presenting outwardly. I think this is the core of the problem. If you can get them to open up and trust you, they are honest in saying that they don't think much of themselves. I think this is actually the core of the therapy with the narcissistic personality, is that you need to get this person to be able to trust you. And it's not that you have to trick your way into getting them to trust you. You just have to show over time that you're a trustworthy person. And you can do that by being more non-judgmental. Remember, the narcissist doesn't think much of themselves. They're already judging themselves harshly all the time anyway. This is typically why they judge other people harshly. And so if a therapist is good about not judging them in the therapy session, they tend to open up more in their therapy. The narcissist spends a large amount of time creating this shell of themselves, this mask that they present to people in their life. This mask tends to be very charming and witty. It's seemingly intelligent. Some narcissists are genuinely intelligent. Some aren't, but they come across as if they are. They like being the center of attention, but only because they like that others can be distracted from seeing who they truly are, meaning they like the center of attention, but they only like the attention being on the mask that they're showing, not necessarily on people paying attention to how they feel inside. We're going to get to that later. What's even more ironic is that most narcissists are actually competent as human beings, about the same as anybody else, but narcissists don't believe that to be true. So the low self-confidence, the low self-esteem that they tend to feel on the inside is masked by this creation that they put together. But the funny thing is that they're actually fairly competent as people. That's part of the goal of therapy as well with a narcissist, is to get them to see that they're truly competent. They're actually fine. And it's learning to confront the shame and the guilt and the low self-esteem that they've dug inside of themselves. Um, the dislike, they tend to dislike people who they see as weak or indecisive. This reminds them of themselves deep down. They tend to respect people who are confident or come across as arrogant sometimes. They actually respect those people more. The reason is that they see people who are displaying weaknesses in some way or vulnerabilities. They view them as weak, and hence they don't respect them because it's really just a mirror reflecting back on them. A person who questions a narcissist is seen as being disrespectful to them. You may not even question them directly. It could just be perceived disrespect. But a narcissist will then feel justified in showing you one of the emotions that they aren't afraid of, and in this case, it's anger. Remember, narcissists like you seeing the cover that they're able to present, the mask. They don't like it when you're able to see a bit deeper into them. They feel weak and vulnerable, and they don't like that feeling. And so even if your intent is not to harm them, meaning you've simply gotten them to open up or expose themselves in some way, they feel justified in getting angry at you because you've made them feel weak rather than them taking the responsibility for that feeling. Now, some call this narcissistic rage when they outburst this anger. but it doesn't necessarily come in the form of physical outbursts. It can also come across as passive aggressive. So let's kind of look at these two. Outbursts, these are the physical or outwardly verbal threats that they tend to make to people, but it could come out as self harm also. So occasionally, narcissists can be seen to self harm. The passive aggressive version, on the other hand, is punishing people passively through things like silent treatment or sulking, or they tend to ignore them. Now, there are a few triggers for a narcissist's anger. Let's go through a few of these. Number one, you challenge their confidence, showing them they may not be as great as they think that they are. You hurt their self esteem. This is the second trigger. This is when you show them their shortcomings and they end up feeling shame for those shortcomings. Or you have confronted their sense of superiority. When you question the relationship or show doubts, you show that they may not be a great lover, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. And so you've exposed their lack of superiority in some way. Now, people who have relationships with narcissists find that they become confused by these outbursts. As healthy people, they like to know what they've done wrong in order to correct themselves. So if you're someone who's in a relationship with a narcissist and you see this angry outburst, you can be easily confused by it. You don't know where this came from. Because remember, you're not directly challenging them. It's just the feeling or the perception of being challenged. And healthy people like to know what they've done wrong in relationships. They like to figure out what they've done so that they can correct themselves for the future and do something better the next time. So that plays into the narcissist. That's a problem because a narcissist wants to use that against you. They want to take that good quality of where you kind of question yourself and you try to get feedback from them, and instead they'll constantly turn it on you, making it to seem that you're always then the problem. But they never seemingly self-reflect. They don't ever consider their own ways that they're presenting their behaviors or their feelings in the relationship themselves. Because remember, in their mind, their anger is justified. Now, because narcissists don't know how to communicate well with others, they're going to blame, but they'll never give constructive feedback, right? So they'll finger point and blame, and they'll shame, and they'll insult you, but they're not going to give you constructive feedback that's going to help in the relationship. It can also be confusing to the person in the relationship as the narcissist starts to be a different person than the one they met. This is one of the most difficult parts that people who are in a relationship with a narcissist tend to deal with. Remember, narcissists are charming and they're intelligent and they're funny. And those are fantastic traits. And those are the ones that they tend to present in the beginning. And so a person can really fall for someone with those traits. People like senses of humor. They like feeling like they're getting a lot of attention. Confidence is sexy. People like confidence in other people. And these are the traits that a narcissist shows in the beginning. And it could even be for a while, months, in the beginning of the relationship. The confusion sets in when they start getting the angry outbursts and things because they're questioning themselves. Well, what did I do to hurt this person? They've typically treated me well. They've been charming. I don't understand what I've done. They're not getting constructive feedback. And so this confusion starts to set in, and it is where you see the beginnings of the narcissistic personality start to tear down their relationship. Now, the good part about narcissists, at least in my experience, is that because they're perfectionists and because they think highly of themselves, they want to do well at everything. And this includes counseling. So if you can get a narcissist into counseling, they can typically do well with a strong therapist. This motivation is helpful. A good therapist knows how to manage that, and they also know how to manage the narcissist's anger, but they can also temper a narcissist's expectations. Remember, the narcissist at first is only going to respect the person who they see as some sort of, either arrogant or confident or dominant in some way. They respect that. And so the therapist in the beginning has to come across as that. This is the therapist who's confident in their abilities, the therapist who can set healthy boundaries. Um, they respond well to both cognitive behavior therapy for anger management, but also different forms of insight therapy so that they can understand themselves better and deal with that kind of internal low self esteem or low sense of self worth and shame. So, both forms of therapy, that cognitive behavior therapy or the insight type of therapy, actually does pretty well for narcissism. However, therapy is not short for someone with any kind of a personality disorder. It tends to be pretty long lived. And so, in many cases, we're talking a couple of years or longer. And that's assuming the person can stay dedicated to it. Now, before I kind of wrap some of this up, I want to put out a caution. Um, I think if you've listened to my podcast long enough, if you've listened to the show long enough, you know that I am not a fan of people self-diagnosing. So what I mean is that the purpose of me educating people about narcissism and narcissistic rage and anger is that I want people to be able to kind of notice the things that might be going on in their own relationships. However, it is not me encouraging you to diagnose the person that you're with yourself. The official diagnosis needs to come from a professional. And if you're confused about what you could be dealing with, it might be a good idea for you yourself to go into some counseling and talk to that therapist so that the two of you could see what you might be dealing with. So, in these relationships, don't self diagnose the narcissist in the relationship. Don't diagnose your spouse. Because what I commonly see people doing then is that because they've read an article or something, they then use that diagnosis that they have given their spouse or their significant other. Uh, it becomes an argument in itself. It becomes a reason that the person can finger point and blame the other person in the relationship. And so then it becomes used as a weapon rather than a piece of information and knowledge that can be gained in a way to healthily help this relationship. So don't self diagnose. Something else to keep in mind, too, is that as we're talking about personality disorders in general, as with anything else, they're people too. They're humans, right? And so if a person gets angry, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is because of their narcissism. It's too easy to fall into that trap, seeing a person's anger as always being able to be blamed on their diagnosis. That's unhealthy. You shouldn't do that in a relationship. So, and I'm quick to call clients out who do that kind of thing because being a human being means we have a wide variety of emotions. And sometimes we have a reason to be angry. Not all anger is unhealthy. And so, even if you find out that you are in a relationship with a narcissist, it doesn't necessarily mean that every time they show any anger, that this must then be blamed on their narcissism. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to the relationship. The way that you can tell the difference between, typical anger versus some kind of narcissistic rage is typically the surprise, meaning you're not getting constructive feedback from your partner. You don't understand why they're angry or where this came from. And it seemed to come on very quickly. That's the problem. That's the key right there. But if someone's bringing up their dislikes in a relationship or they're bringing up concerns that they have with you in that relationship, you can't blame the narcissism because, remember, they're people as well. And there are going to be times that people are actually going to be justified in feeling some of the emotions that they feel. And so, as with any case, the first thing you need to do is validate that emotion. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with the emotion. It just means that you validate it. You just say, okay, yes, I see that you're angry or upset or sad, hurt. Um, and then you can move into the, what do you think we should do about it? So I hope this has helped. I knew kind of coming into this episode that I was taking actually a very big topic, narcissism, personality disorders, and the anger that we can see with that. I knew I was taking a big topic and kind of condensing it down into a 20-minute talk. And so this isn't the be-all, end-all when it comes to information about narcissism in general. I just wanted to focus specifically on narcissism and anger. If you have a question for the show, you can call and leave an anonymous voicemail at 615-538-8215. Or you can send an anonymous email to info@navigatelife.co with live in the subject line. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. I'm at Travis Hill LPC, on Instagram at navigate_life, or on Facebook at NavigateLifeTH. If you'd like to work with me personally, head over to the website at navigatelife.co for more information. If you can't watch the show live, no worries. You can subscribe to the audio podcast on iTunes and Google Play, or catch the videos on the website. If you or someone you know is interested in anger management, check out my book, Navigate Anger, available in print, ebook, and audiobook format. I will talk to you all next week. Take care.